My brother proposed to my fiancé to prove that she didn't truly love me. My 28M brother Mark, 26M, used to date my fiancée Jen, 26F, a year ago. For context, they only stayed together for about a month before he broke things off. He explained that he was bored with being in a relationship and had never really wanted to settle down anyway. At the time they were dating, I was in a different state, so I had no idea he even had a girlfriend, and I had no clue who Jen was until I met her. Jen and I met at a bar when I moved back in October, and we hit it off really well. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I had ever met. We met up a few more times before making our relationship official. Fast forward to December, and I finally brought her up to my family, proposing that they meet her at Christmas. They knew I was in a relationship, but I'm not the most open about my personal life, so I kept details about her to a minimum until I knew how serious we really were. My parents asked to see pictures, and they started passing my phone around the dinner table. Mark saw it and blew up, calling me a terrible brother for dating his ex-girlfriend, and he demanded that I break it off with her. I refused. When I asked Jen about it, she confirmed that they dated and provided me with details about their breakup. It took a few weeks, but eventually, Mark stopped bringing up me dating his ex, and I thought he was over it. On Jen's birthday this year, I took her out to a fancy dinner with both of our families and her closest friends, and I asked her to marry me. Mark flipped out once again and blew up about me proposing to her, which my sisters and I immediately shut down. The incident happened this past weekend. Mark had been pretty quiet about the entire thing for the last 2 months. I didn't see him much and figured he went low contact with me, which I had no problem with. Then he invited me and Jen for a family dinner at his apartment with my parents and sisters. I thought it was weird, but my parents and sisters were also going, so we agreed to attend. The dinner was nice, nothing too fancy, and we moved to the living room to talk. About 30 minutes into normal conversation, Mark stood up and told us he had an announcement. He made a long speech about being happy to have his family around for his big moment, then got on one knee and pulled out this cheap ring while asking Jen to marry him. Jen was confused and obviously uncomfortable, demanding that he put it away and stand up. My dad tried to make a grab for Mark, but I got to him first and I won't repeat most of it, mostly because I was too angry to even listen, but he said something along the lines of wanting to show me that Jen wasn't really into me and just wanted to get back at him. Before it could get worse, my parents rushed me out and promised to talk to him. It's been a few days since it happened, and I'm still mad. I don't know what to do at this point. I'm scared Jen might have second thoughts about marrying me because of this. Update 1. I called Mark and asked him to meet up with me at my place to talk. I told him I would prefer Jen to be around for the conversation as well, but I was cool with it if he didn't want her there. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up at my place around noon today. It was pretty quiet for a few minutes before I initiated the conversation. I apologized for not warning him that I would be proposing to Jen, and I apologized for him. He said it was whatever, but he appreciated the apology. I informed him about what Jen had said regarding their relationship and breakup when I questioned her about it. I asked him to confirm if it was true. I essentially mentioned that his reaction throughout all of this had been extreme, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding their relationship or downplaying how serious they were. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks, and he broke up with her because he lost interest. When Jen asked if his behavior stemmed from lingering feelings or regrets about ending things with her, he stated that he could admit she seemed more attractive than when he last saw her, but there were no residual feelings or regrets. He said he didn't like seeing a girl he dated, even if it was short term, with his older brother, and as a man, I shouldn't have violated him by pursuing things with his ex. I reminded him that I had no idea they dated, so it wasn't as if I consciously did this knowing their history together. He shrugged me off and said it didn't matter, I still should have broken it off. He was adamant that if the roles were reversed, he would have done the same thing, which I doubted. I asked him why he proposed to her if he didn't have any lingering feelings. In summary, he discussed it with one of his buddies who was around when Mark and Jen dated, and the friend put the idea in his head that maybe Jen knew from the start that we were related and was doing this to get back at him, considering Jen had been hung up on him after they broke up. He and his friend thought it would be a good idea to test it and see if they were right, so he came up with the idea to propose and see if she dumped me for him. Jen asked him to elaborate on why he thought she was hung up on him, and he told her that he heard she was asking about him following the breakup and still hanging out at the places they used to go to, so it was a valid assumption. Then, for her to pop up randomly with his brother affirmed his suspicions. Jen told him she'd only asked about him once following the breakup and she'd been hanging out at those places with friends before they started dating, and she wouldn't avoid them because of a breakup. She also told him she was offended at the idea that she would go as low as to pursue me just to get back at him. He shrugged and gave her a weak apology but said she had to see it from his point of view. He asked her if she really didn't know, and she told him that she didn't see the resemblance in us until we were in the same room and we act nothing alike, so it never crossed her mind. He said okay, and that pretty much wrapped up the conversation. He did tell me before he left that I could rescind his invitation to the wedding because he can't bring himself to support our relationship knowing he used to date her. I told him he didn't have to worry about that as he was most likely going to be uninvited anyway. It's been a few hours since our talk, and I do feel better. My parents aren't too happy about him being uninvited, but they understand that it was a mutual decision and probably for the best. My sisters told me they knew he didn't have a good reason for being a prick, and they don't blame me for not wanting him at the wedding. As of now, I'm going to limit contact with Mark, and I doubt he'll reach out to me anytime soon either. Update 2. So I've been low contact with Mark since our last conversation. I haven't called him, and he hasn't called me, our only interactions have been in family settings. As it stands, my mom is now upset that Mark is still uninvited for my wedding. It started with a comment made during my younger sister Sophie's birthday. Her boyfriend of 4 years proposed to her at the end of the night, and we sat around talking about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked a bit about wanting a destination wedding and her ideas for the cake and dress. Then she said something along the lines of, "Teddy, I know Mark's banned from your wedding, but you won't care if he comes to mine, right?" I laughed it off and told her I can't get mad about her guest list even if I wanted to. My mom gave me this weird look and asked if Mark was still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes, and she got irritated. She told me she thought I was joking and said I was being unreasonable to go through with banning him from the wedding since he's family. She accused me of holding a grudge just to be petty. I reminded her that he and I agreed on him not coming. I then told her that this wasn't the time to talk about my wedding since the day was about Sophie, and if Mark or she wants to talk about my wedding, they can call me another time. Sophie laid into my mom a bit about trying to make her special day about Mark, and my mom dropped the issue. For those of you wondering, Mark wasn't at Sophie's party because he apparently had to work and couldn't make it. A few days later, my mom stopped by my house and said she wanted to discuss my wedding. She asked me why I was so adamant about Mark not coming to my wedding. She said that I shouldn't be so insecure about Mark and Jen's previous relationship and that uninviting him was a step too far. I told her that Mark and I mutually agreed on him not coming to the wedding and he can come to me about it himself if he has a problem with it. We got into an argument, and she said that if I wasn't going to re-invite Mark, then she would not be coming either because I'm ostracizing her son. I shrugged and told her if that's what she wants, then she can toss her invite in the trash because I won't beg her to be there. She asked me if I would really be okay with her not attending, and I told her it wouldn't be the first time she missed an event of mine because of Mark. She said I was being a jerk for throwing her past mistakes in her face and she stormed out. I then started getting messages and phone calls from her and a few family members about the situation, saying I was in the wrong and urging me to invite Mark just to keep the peace. Jen's also been getting messages from my mom asking her to talk to me and get me to change my mind, but to my knowledge, she hasn't been responding. So far, most of my mom's side of the family are standing in solidarity with her and not attending, while my dad and his side of the family agree with me and are still coming. My sisters are also still coming to the wedding, and of course, Jen's family too. Also, I talked to Mark about it and asked him if he had a problem with not having an invite. He said he uninvited himself in the first place and he doesn't get why they're making a big deal because he still doesn't want to go. He told me to leave him out of the fighting because he's not involved, and he says he'd tell her the same. As of now, I'm back to being low contact with my mom, but my dad and I are still on decent terms. I'm still deciding on whether I'll re-invite my mom and her family, but the chances are low, and I told my dad this too, which he understands. For now, Jan and I started looking into downsizing the venue since the guest list is significantly smaller. Update 3. My mom is uninvited from the wedding indefinitely. About 2 weeks after she decided not to come to the wedding, she stopped by and said she wanted to clear the air and talk about everything. We agreed and invited her in to join us for dinner. Jan made her a plate of food, and I asked her if she was still planning on not coming to the wedding. She said that while she wants to, she can't get over me not inviting Mark because of a simple mistake. I reminded her that his simple mistake was proposing to my fiancé with me sitting less than 3 feet away from him, and she said it was just a joke. Jan asked her why she wanted to talk if she was maintaining the same stance on Mark coming to the wedding. She said she wanted to talk to Jen, and she was hoping Jen would hear her out and talk me into inviting Mark again. She apparently assumed I was at work and she'd be able to catch her alone. Jen politely told her that she understood her thought process, but she wouldn't have had that conversation anyway without me present since this is about my brother. My mom made a comment somewhere along the lines of Jen being spineless and unable to have a conversation without me thinking for her, which started a pretty heated back and forth between the three of us before Jen told her to get out. By this point, my mom was yelling about her tearing our family apart. While Jen was unlocking the front door, my mom grabbed her hair and pulled her to the ground, still screaming. She hit her and tried to clear her face, and I dragged her off of her and threw her outside. I called my dad and sisters and told them what happened, and my dad was surprised and tried to make excuses, saying she'd been stressed about the situation for a while. My sisters say they knew she'd snap eventually since she's always been crazy. I asked Jen if she wanted to press charges, but she declined and said she only wanted to cut contact with her for good. I told her that part was obvious, but she should still talk to the police since it got physical, but she doesn't want my mom to get arrested. My sisters and Jen's mom came by to comfort her thankfully, so she's doing okay. My mom is blocked on everything until Jen says otherwise. I genuinely don't know what to do now. Jen doesn't want to go to the police because she'd feel guilty having her arrested over this, but my sisters and I want to convince her to, and I'd at least want documentation in case something happens in the future.